Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and I am back again today to talk about this. This is the Focal Bathys closed-back dynamic driver wireless active noise canceling headphone. Really more of a headphone system. More on that in a moment. Okay. From French headphone maker, French audio company, Focal here. This comes in at $799 US, and it is one of sort of a little new mini wave of higher end wireless headphones out on the market right now, along with the Bowers & Wilkins PX8 and the Mark Levinson 5909. Again, trying to I think bring a more audiophile experience into this very consumer-focused space of these active noise canceling headphones. Okay, so we will do a review of this one today. I'll give my thoughts on it. This was a loan from a friend of the channel. I have no formal affiliation with Focal, so all thoughts and opinions you're about to hear are mine and mine alone. There will be links where you can buy this headphone down in the description. If Apos Audio ever has this product, which I just looked and I didn't see it, but if they ever put that up, I may come back at a later date and put an affiliate link to where you can buy this from Apos down below, so I'd get a few bucks back if ever you used that link to buy this. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, but for right now, let's go ahead and do shameless self-promotion, and then we'll come back on the other side and get into the review. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. So it bears quick repeating that this is an $800 US product here. So just to kind of keep that in mind. And I also want to say, I'll use this little intro right here to talk about some of the features of this thing, but then also what that feature set means for this review and any review of a product like this. So again, this is a wireless Bluetooth active noise canceling, really more of a headphone system than just a headphone. Now, why am I saying something like this? Well, because of the wireless Bluetooth and active noise canceling nature, we have to look at this as really an all-in-one, on-the-go audio solution. So in this headphone-shaped form factor, okay, and again, the overall shape is unmistakably headphone. So in this package here, this gizmo, you do have a headphone. You also have a Bluetooth receiver. You have a USB controller. You have a digital to analog converter. You have a digital signal processing center in here somewhere, right? And you have a headphone amp. And then, of course, you have a headphone. So really, this is a complete listening system that does everything except for actually bring the music in itself. So you need something to provide this a music signal, a digital music signal at that usually. And then this is the complete component rack, if you will, from there. Okay, DAC, preamp, amp, EQ, all of that kind of stuff, all right in here. Okay, so because of that, you cannot just look at this as an $800 headphone. You've got to look at this as an $800 all-in-one, on-the-go listening system. So I am going to be grading it on that curve, so to speak, in this review. So when I talk about sound and all of that later on in the review, keep all of those things in mind, that it's just simply not fair to compare this to a passive $800 headphone all on its own. We've got to keep all of that other stuff in mind. Okay, now with that, let's go ahead and get some specs out of the way, and then I will cut to a different clip where we do a more complete unit tour. So the codecs in this thing, for Bluetooth, the most advanced codec this will support is aptX HD. So there is no LDAC here. So keep that in mind if that matters to you. However, my ears told me that that doesn't really matter, and we'll get to that into the sound description here in a little bit. Another thing to observe is that there is a USB input on it here that is used for charging, but also can be used for data. So this can be a USB DAC and headphone all together here. So you can plug this into a computer or a DAP via this USB connection, and it will be seen by that device as an audio device, right? And you can use it in DAC mode there if you wish, rather than just Bluetooth carry it around. Okay, and formats that it will support via USB DAC is all PCM up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz, except for 176.2 kilohertz of any bit depth. Okay, so that one sampling rate is not in there. Now, that's usually not a significant problem. I don't know of too many files out there that stream from Tidal or Qobuz or Amazon HD or Apple Lossless or anything like that that are in 176.2 kilohertz. Where I see that happen most frequently is if you need to do a conversion of a local DSD file to PCM to send to a device like this. One of the common conversions of DSD64 anyway is to 24-bit 176.2 kilohertz. So if your software player, be that a DAP or a computer or whatever, is normally converting a local DSD file, again, if you have DSD files, not everyone does, okay, but if it's normally converting to that 176.2 kilohertz, you'll need to change something in your settings so that it outputs to something else. Ottervana, I plugged this into my desktop computer and used Ottervana for it, and Ottervana recognized it right away that this did not handle 176.2 kilohertz sampling rates, and so it automatically changed the DSD output to 24-bit 88.2 kilohertz, which this handled fine. Now, the only issue with that is that you're losing a little bit of information because 24-bit 88.2 kilohertz, I believe, has less total bits in the signal than a 2.62 megahertz 1-bit DSD file. So that's something to keep in mind there. My Canon N6 Mark II DAP, which I would connect this to via USB a fair amount of times, I used the USB Audio Player Pro app for that, and when I wanted to play local DSD files, I had to deactivate the forced USB bit perfect output on the USB Audio Player Pro app, change that to use bit perfect when possible, and then set it to convert DSD files to PCM. And when it did that, it converted them to 192 kilohertz sampling rate files, which this handled. It didn't mess with 176.2. So most files, PCM files anyway, are going to be okay. The one sticking point is when you get into DSD to PCM conversion that you need to look out for, at least in my experience with this headphone. All right. So I'm going to step through a unit tour here, which is in a different clip from a different vantage point. I'll talk about the features and the packaging and some of the accessories that come with this. We'll come back on the other side of that clip where I will talk about comfort, okay, and wearing this thing around, and then we will get into the sound. So let's cut to that other clip. Overhead view to talk about packaging and accessories, because there are a couple of points I want to make here as well, particularly when we're talking about a product that is designed for on-the-go use. I think packaging and how it all comes together and how you can carry it around are important things to talk about. But anyway, this is the box that it comes in. It's a nice, simple, handsome white box with the Bathys written on it. Noise canceling headphones, hi-fi sound, French design. Okay, it's rather simple. You get the features, all that listed on the box there. You know, other stuff there, and okay, more info on the back. Okay, pretty handsome package. Pretty easy to use. Flap on the bottom here, flips up, open it like this, and you are presented with this here case right here. Now, on the flap of the box, you get some QR codes to be able to download apps and stuff like that. And then in the box, you get this little gray and black case here. And then also you get user's manuals, okay, pretty standard stuff there. the silica gel packet that you have to be reminded not to eat. How this has not become a TikTok challenge, I don't know. Okay, grateful that it hasn't, but maybe someday. Hopefully not. Don't eat those. All right, and then you get this carrying case, which is at least superficially similar to the similar style that has come with other Focal headphones. Like this is the case for my Focal Radiance, and the Radiance is actually in here. I'll show it to you in a minute. And you can see a little bit, doesn't fully fit in the frame here, but enough to see that there is definitely a difference in size, okay, between these two carrying cases. I mean, in basically every dimension, there is, okay, a difference in size. So this one right here that has the Bathys in it is a lot more put in a suitcase or backpack friendly kind of size than the Radiance case is. All right, so then how does the headphone fit inside there? This nice little zipper here. Open this up. Okay, there it is. We get this pouch up top that can carry some cabling. They do give you a 3.5 millimeter TRS to TRS cable so that you can bypass all of the internal DSP and amp and all of that if you want. I used it very, very little, only long enough to know that if you bypass all of the internal digital signal processing, the whole thing sounds like crap. Okay, it is definitely designed to be used with the DSP and the ANC and all of that engaged. Otherwise, we get this nice little cutout here for the stock USB cable, which is USB-C to USB-C. All right, and then we see that the headphone itself fits in here. We get cup swivel such that these will lay completely flat like so, okay, into the case like that. And so then we have the headphone itself, okay, which is this very nice like gunmetal gray kind of finish with the circular pattern. It's got a very Focal aesthetic to it, okay? Not surprisingly, it is a Focal, okay? And yeah, so that is the basic look. You've got that much room for ears in there, okay? All right, about that size in there. So it's a nice looking headphone. And then this may not show up well later, but on the, this is the right cup, okay? You have buttons for volume up and down, okay? You've got a pairing button here for Bluetooth. You have the power selector here, so off USB DAC mode is in the middle, and then on, which is full Bluetooth right there. Okay, the USB port, the 3.5 millimeter input, all of that there. And then on this cup, we have this button here, which I believe cycles through phone calls. Like, if you get a phone call, that's the button to take it, I think. Never actually tested this for phone calls, but pretty sure that's what it's for. Okay, so there we go. Fairly handsome little unit there. All that. Now, back to the case and why I think that's important. So again, this one compared to the Radiance case, and the Radiance case is pretty standard Focal. Like this is the case just with different colors that they send with pretty much all of their wired headphones. Save the original Utopia did not have that, but starting with the 2020 edition of the Utopia, and the new one, the 2022 edition, has the same case. They put this case in all of them. And again, it is a little bigger. The headphone sits in here like this. The one advantage that this case has over the Bathys case is there is enough room in here. So here's my headphone cable. I can stick my Canon N6 Mark II DAP in here and carry that with the headphone itself if I want to. So that is one advantage. And then if I had a USB cable, there would be room for it to fit up here and all of that if I needed it. So that is like the one advantage, if you think that is an advantage of this case design here. But like the Radiance, for example, does not swivel its cups, okay, so that they lie flat and that you could get them in here. Just isn't going to work. All right, so again, as far as being able to travel with one of these, okay, the Bathys case is definitely more overall travel friendly in terms of the amount of space it takes up. But you are able to fit like another wire in there, or like the DAP that I showed you. Okay, but again, in a backpack or a suitcase, this takes up less room. The only other case that I know of right now, or that I have experience with, I'm sure there are others, would be this one. This is the case for my Sony WH-1000XM3. And unshockingly, inside it is my Sony WH-1000XM3. So just the way, bumping the camera there, excuse me. Just the way this one folds up, it does fit into a slightly smaller case than what the Bathys does. Just a quick size comparison here. You see, it is a present difference, but not a huge difference. All right. So anyway, those are just things to be aware of and to know if you plan to buy a product like this and want to know like how friendly is it to actually pack up and use and carry around and that sort of thing. There you go. All right. Let's get back into the rest of the review where we'll talk about sound and all of that fun stuff. All right, let's talk about comfort and wearing this thing around, and I think an appropriate way to do that is with it on my head here. And that's a good way to lead right into the fact that even when it is powered off, as it is right now, there is pretty good isolation. I don't think that the microphone here that I'm using is picking it up, but I'm in the basement of my house right now. My desktop computer is off to my left. It has some fan noise that is usually fairly audible, but I'm not hearing it right now. My furnace is in an adjacent room. It is currently running right now because it's early January in the northern hemisphere and I'm above the 45th parallel and it's cold, okay? So the furnace is running and I can just barely hear it with that on right now with this off. So the isolation is pretty good. And like I snap my fingers, yes, I hear them, but they are definitely muffled and attenuated a fair bit. Now, if I activate the noise canceling, so I'll just go ahead and flip the switch on here, give it a moment, and you should see it light up. Okay, I think some lights will come on, and the noise canceling just kicked on, and I hear only the very faintest of background noise. Furnace in the other room, all of that desktop computer. It's very, very quiet. Now I am noticing some pressure on my ears from the ANC, which is a thing that ANC headphones do, and I'm going to turn it off right now because it's bothering me. Okay, that I do not notice being a problem. Ow, did it turn off? Whew, there we go. Okay, that I do not notice being a problem. I can handle ANC and that pressure on my ears just fine when there is music playing or like listening to a podcast or something like that, but if it's just on my head and on, that pressure gets to me. So that if that applies to you as well, and this is not just the Focal Bathys that does this to me, this is any ANC headphone where that happens. So if that applies to you, that may still happen here. Okay, so the active noise canceling, again, we'll just talk about that real quick since I was mentioning it, is good. It is quite effective. I don't know that it is quite as effective as what Sony is pulling off these days. I have not really heard many of the Bose, but it's pretty good and will take out most of the steady droning kinds of background noise that ANC is really good at. Like the noise of planes, trains, and automobiles, for example, when you're riding on one of those. It does a pretty good job of taking out those kinds of sounds. You know, I was able to sit next to my running dishwasher in the kitchen, sit at the kitchen table where the dishwasher was just a few feet away running and not hear it very much, you know, and still listen to music and all that quite well there. So I don't know that the noise canceling itself is state of the art here, but it's solid, okay? And for a first effort from a company just getting into ANC headphones and all of that, I'd say is really well done. Okay, now back to the comfort. The physical comfort, again, minus that pressure on the ear thing that is only an issue for me when music is not playing, is good. Like it hugs the head well. It stays on the head well. Like when you move your head around, it does not wiggle around much, which I think is good for an OTG-focused kind of product. and all of that. Now, the comfort, again, the pads are nice and soft here. I really did not have, I really never noticed any kind of hot spots or uncomfortable things on there. It just kind of molds and fits on my head at least very well, and the pads seal it up nice and tight and all of that. Now, if you are prone to sweaty ears in headphones, you can get my ears can anyway get a fairly warm inside of here. Like, for example, I just mentioned it's winter here where I live and it's cold, and I was walking the dog this morning before I shot this video, and it was, what, 13, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, when I was walking the dog here, and my ears didn't get cold. I had these on. My ears did not get cold. My forehead got a little cold. I had to put my hoodie hood up over top of my head to hold some of that top of the head heat in, but my ears never got cold, so there's that. I could see how if you live in a really hot environment, hot, humid, wherever, that ear temperature thing could bother some after a while. So that might be one kind of comfort area of note to think about if you're planning, if you're looking at possibly buying this. So other things like battery life, I have no issues with. I charged it up when I first got it, used it for a while, charged it up before I went. This traveled with me when I did some holiday travel because it's early January, and the person who loaned this to me was fine with me taking it on my holiday travels, and so it was a travel companion there over the Christmas and New Year season for me. And I didn't get to use it a ton, but when I did get to use it, which was, a total of 5 or 6 hours, all of that, but it just stayed off. Like, it holds its battery charge well, and like I have not had to charge it despite using it a fair amount. I would say I think I've maybe charged it once since I've been home, and today is what, January 6th, okay, when I shoot this. So I think battery life is fairly good. Now, the active noise canceling never turns off. Okay, so it's on there. The only way around it is to just use it completely passively and go in through here. But the minute you flick a power switch on this thing, all of the digital signal processing, all of the ANC, all of that is going to come on. Now, I think I mentioned in that unit tour video that if you plug this thing in via the wired connection, it sounds like crap. It is clearly designed to be used with ANC and DSP and all of that on. Okay, so yes, just keep that in mind. Whether it's USB mode or whether you're in wireless Bluetooth mode, okay, active noise canceling is going to be active and all of the DSP is going to be happening. Now, why is the DSP necessary? So we are talking about a closed back phone here. Focal, with their other closed backs, has talked about how building a closed back headphone is like putting a very large speaker in a very small room. And they have pulled that off pretty successfully with like the Radiance that I showed you earlier, Elegia, Celesti, Stellia, and all that. Those are some pretty solid closed back performers out there, and they've done really good stuff with like building the inside of the cup and all of that to dissipate sound energy, doing just enough venting to maintain good isolation, but still let some of the excess acoustic energy out and all of that. However, because they have to add an amplifier and a DAC and a Bluetooth receiver and a DSP and all of that in here, okay, you lose real estate around that. So your large speaker, your very large speaker in a very small room analogy becomes like a very large speaker with a full rack of gear in a linen closet, okay, kind of analogy. So they've got to do some stuff, okay, to make this sound right. And plus, there's going to be DSP in here because of the way active noise canceling works, right? If you're not unfamiliar, active noise canceling, there's a microphone array around this thing. It's going to listen to the ambient sounds that are around, then it's going to create a signal that matches that ambient sound but is 180 degrees out of phase, and then play that through the drivers in here so that the combination of the outer sounds and then the out of phase played back sound in here do destructive wave interference and, in theory, zero out all of that ambient sound, okay? That's the active noise canceling bit of it. All right, so then the last thing I'll say before we move on and talk about the sound quality is that active noise canceling, just the way it's done right now, and this is currently unavoidable, is going to have an adverse impact on the ultimate level of sound quality that can be achieved. Okay, why is that? Well, because of the way I just described it there, it keeps the drivers busy, right? For active noise canceling to do active noise canceling things is what I just said. It uses a microphone, it listens to ambient sounds, it reproduces that same sound but does it 180 degrees out of phase and then plays that through the drivers to cancel out the ambient sounds. That requires driver motion, which means that when you're listening to music, the drivers are required to not only reproduce the music signal that you're putting through there, they are also in motion, moving in response to the ambient sounds around you. So that's a lot of extra driver motion that is happening, and the more the driver has to move, the higher demand you put on the drivers, the less able they are going to be able to respond to a lot of subtle little details in the actual music signal. Okay, so that is just something to keep in mind. It's a challenge moving forward for all audio companies who are interested in doing active noise canceling, that right now there just is a ceiling on ultimate sonic performance because of the way active noise canceling is done. So let me just get that out of the way too, and then we'll actually now get into the sound. As I've kind of already mentioned here at a couple of places, the source gear that I used this included connecting it directly to a Windows desktop PC with Windows 10 using Audirvana as the source. More often though, this was connected via USB to my Canon N6 Mark II DAP or via Bluetooth to my Samsung S22 Plus smartphone, which is currently filming this video. Okay. Or using the Bluetooth on that same Canon DAP. Okay, maxing out the Bluetooth settings to the extent that I am able, all of that, and yeah. So using either Spotify apps on either of the mobile devices to use 320 kilobit Spotify streams or downloaded files, or I did use the Qobuz app to listen to lossless streams on my smartphone for a little bit. Okay, so there are the sources to use with this. All right, so all of that into the sound then. I'm just going to say up front that this probably is the best sounding Bluetooth headphone that I have heard to date. I have not heard a ton of them. Got my Sony the XM3. I've said the correct name already, but it's right there. Okay. I've also used some outboard Bluetooth receivers, like I think the Topping BC3 is one of them, the X-Duo XQ50 Pro, and then I would connect those via SPDIF to various sound systems. And there is a quality loss with Bluetooth over a quality wired solution. But even with that said, and even though this tops out at aptX HD and doesn't use LDAC, this is overall the best sounding Bluetooth headphone that I have heard, okay, easily. All right, so that's something. And so that should be getting some of your attentions right now, okay? So in general, the sound signature from a frequency response standpoint, Focal has kind of blended elements of the mainstream tuning, which I would associate like these Sonys as having like a mainstream tuning, which basically means elevated bass, maybe a slightly more elevated treble, but usually a bit of a treble peak in there to kind of create an illusion of more detail and just more sparkle and air. And then sometimes a bit of mid-forwardness, but the Focal has not gone all in on that. They have balanced a lot of that out and still brought in elements of more audiophile tuning in there. So actually, these have some elevated sub-bass, but for the most part, beyond that, sound pretty neutral in their tuning. Now, there is a little bit of a dip in the mid-range around, I think it's like somewhere centered around 800 or 900 hertz, which is a little bit in the range where some male vocals can lack a little bit of body and fullness, and some electric guitars and all of that, I noticed in particular, can sound a little bit more aggressively thin and forward, but it doesn't get in the way very much or very often, and for the most part doesn't change the overall sense of neutrality to the frequency response once you get past the elevation in the bass that takes place below about 100 to 120 hertz in there, I want to say. Okay, so a little bit of a sub bass shelf, but then mostly neutral, small dip centered around 800 or 900 hertz that has a little bit of an audible effect, but not a bad one. Okay, so good job on the tuning, and actually that has made it probably the best overall tuned wireless headphone that I have heard to date, and also maybe somewhat hilariously, I don't know, you can be the judge of that, puts it probably in the better half of Focal's line of headphones, period, in terms of its tonality, okay, and having a, you know, balanced and realistic, you know, neutralish kind of tuning. Because some Focals are tuned a bit wonky through the mids, like the Clear, definitely the Clear MG, the Stellia, like are just 3 examples that come up right away where the mid-range tuning is just, I don't know why they did it, okay? All right, but this one is a little bit more even and all of that through there. Now, there is pretty good dynamics. Now, this does not have the dynamic impact that Focal is known for. It is not quite as aggressive or as hard-hitting. It is not devoid of impact. It's not necessarily weak in that area, but the dynamics and the hard-hitting nature of the sound is not as noticeable here as on other Focals. Okay, but it is about on the same level as what a lot of active noise-canceling headphones, like more consumer-oriented ones, bring to the table. So if you are used to the dynamic presentation of the Sonys, of the Bose, like of, you know, those kinds of active noise canceling things, this one is right in line with those in terms of dynamics. All right, where the ANC and wireless natures, I think, really make themselves the most known sonically is when you're talking about detail retrieval, and then that overlaps somewhat with spatial presentation, imaging and separation and that sort of thing. So the resolution here, even on Bluetooth mode, is the best that I've heard, again, from a Bluetooth headphone. It does a much better job of like the Sonys that I just showed you, or any of those, of like pulling out the overtones of bass guitars. Like you can hear the finger action on bass guitars a lot more clearly and apparently through here than you can through those Sonys, right, and things of that. So there is, for what they are in Bluetooth, excellent, I would say, detail retrieval. And that, like even on Spotify streams, which are lossy, okay, I could hear the added detail and resolution coming through and through these in a lot of ways over what I'm used to from Bluetooth solutions. Okay. Now, the staging and the spatial presentation, like it's still very in the head kind of staging, like a lot of wireless kinds of devices are, even when it's connected via USB mode. It's like that. There's like a line, it's got good imaging and separation laterally, but it's almost like in a straight line right through my head. It might be pulled in front of my ears a little bit, but it still sounds in the head to me. So it's bigger than what the Sony pulls off from a soundstage standpoint, but still very in the head. And then in a straight line, you get pretty good imaging and separation. Not a whole lot of depth, though. Again, I think that's a consequence of this just being what it is. Okay, there, but still a step up from the $300, $400, $500 ANCs that are out there. So, and then on the subject of detail retrieval and all that, the detail retrieval especially improves when you go to when you go to the wired USB mode and use this in USB DAC mode, like then the resolution becomes much more true audiophile grade, and you do get a significant step up in the detail retrieval there. And then you also get a better sense of imaging and separation. It doesn't change the overall staging of being kind of this straight line that runs through your head, okay, but along that line of sound, you get a better sense of separation, more well-defined, spatial images and that sort of thing in there too. So there's definitely an advantage to using the USB wired when you can. Now, some of you are really going to hate what I'm about to say, but this was definitely true to my ears anyway. When I first listened to these, I just kind of, in the acclimation phase, I just used them, a massive playlist that I have on Spotify, and just put them on my head, and I'd use them while I was doing housework, while I was walking the dog, and like all of that, just kind of background listening and just getting used to their sound, right? And then I switched to USB DAC mode to do a more critical listening to them, and I used the stock USB cable for that. And that dip that I was talking about in the mid-range that's centered around 800 or 900 hertz was more noticeable than it was in the Bluetooth mode. Like, it was Metallica where I really heard it. Like, James Hetfield's voice just sounded a little bit thinner and a little bit, like, not quite shouty, but getting closer to that line. It just didn't feel like, it didn't sound quite like James Hetfield. Like, I could tell it was James Hetfield singing, but his voice didn't sound as rich or as full as it did even when Metallica songs would come up in my big shuffled playlist in Bluetooth mode. And I thought that was weird, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to investigate because, holidays and all of that kind of stuff. That was something that I made a note to come back to. So then I came back and was going to listen for that added dip in the frequency response. Because, it was weird. The increased resolution, the more coherent imaging and separation, and more holographic, not truly holographic, but more holographic spatial presentation was there with the wired connection over the wireless connection with that stock USB cable. But that frequency response, there was that mid-range dip was more noticeable. So anyway, I made a note to come back and check that. And when I came back to it, I happened to be using my AudioQuest Forest USB cable for that with the Dragon Tail C to A adapter from my Canon N6 Mark II. And I was not hearing that added dip in the mid-range, which threw me at first, and then it finally dawned on me that I had been using the stock USB cable initially. And so I went and I grabbed that cable again and I plugged it in, and just there it was, right? So the stock USB cable emphasizes that mid-range dip a little bit over both the Bluetooth mode and that AudioQuest Forest USB cable. And I know some of you are going to hate that and accuse me of peddling snake oil or whatever, okay? But it's true, okay? The sonic differences were there, okay? And I'll link you to Passion for Sound's channel where he did a blind test of listeners of USB cables, and they heard differences. So I will put a link to that in the description below as well. Okay, but anyway, that's what my ears heard here. So overall, I really enjoyed listening to the Bathys here. It is, again, I think it bears repeating, it is the best sounding active noise canceling wireless Bluetooth headphone system that I can think that I have heard right now. I have not heard that Bowers & Wilkins. I have not heard the Mark Levinson. But of the ones I have heard, this one is the best so far, and by a comfortable margin. And I say that because the best comparison that I can give you is with my Sony XM3s here, which feature set is pretty similar overall. It's also comfortable for long-term listening, and it isolates well, and the active noise canceling on here might actually be better than the Focal. But sonically, when you're actually listening to music, the Focal is noticeably superior. Even with this in LDAC Bluetooth mode and this in the aptX HD, this one it sounds like the tuning is much more bass heavy and thick, and it bleeds into the mid bass, so things can sound very bloated and sloppy here in comparison. There's also a mid-range peak in here, which does make vocals shoutier more often than it does on this. And then this one also does not have anywhere near the resolution or the imaging and the separation that the Bathys is capable of. Now, I don't like comparing this one to passive wireless headphones, but like if you are familiar with Focal's Elegia, this one I think is a little bit better and more neutral tuning than the Elegia. But the Elegia is going to have the better dynamics, okay? Again, like the Elegia is getting into Focal's line where they are just very hard hitting, okay? Fast, aggressive in their dynamic presentation kind of thing, where this is a little bit more laid back there. But the Elegia is going to have much better staging and detail retrieval. So again, this is not a Focal Elegia put into a wireless Bluetooth form factor. It's not, okay? It is not on that level sonically. But it is comfortably, again, a step up over, you know, Sony's WH-1000 line, the Bose 700, I would wager. I haven't heard it, but I'd be very confident in saying it's comfortably ahead of like the Apple AirPods Pro, whatever Apple's full-size ANC Bluetooth headphone is. Okay, it's going to be ahead of that sonically, I am quite certain. So I really enjoyed the Bathys. Thanks to the friend of the channel for loaning it. I really enjoyed getting to know it. It is a very good sounding solution for what it is. I do think the entire package for a lot of people is going to be worth that $800 that the asking price is going for. So I will leave it there. It's easy for me to recommend this one. Good job, Focal. Focal has a knack for introducing new products really well, like their headphone line, the Utopia, the Clear, the Stellia, like all of those, like that was their first foray into headphones, and they were mostly pretty good, which is kind of rare to get into a brand new product category and do well, but they've done it again. Okay, so impressive stuff. All right, I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Focal Bathys. Please check out my PayPal, my Patreon, like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. And as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.